Yeah.
The day all souls depart. After several months of constant searching for a house to live in after moving to a new job, he reached Robert Sanford and his young wife Mary, until they finally found their dream house, and it was a very beautiful cottage in the middle of the charming nature, although it was old, somewhat dilapidated, and old. But their splendid location, overlooking the river at the end of the thick forest, impressed them so much that, in 1901, the Sanford family moved from London to the new home near Ashburn. The tall trees of the forest, this idyllic site witnessed a series of horrific accidents long ago. He built the little hut on the land on which a large country house was erected, owned by two brothers, according to the popular accounts in the region, who were on a great degree of immorality and great evil, and were accused of raping many women in the area and killing some of them. Even one of their relatives found great difficulty in persuading the church to conduct Christian ceremonies, bury them in the Christian way, and perform rituals. They were buried in the churchyard and not in cemeteries, and a huge marble cover was placed over their cemetery. And a statue of the two brothers was placed on it, representing them side by side. The two statues were placed so that no one could lift the marble from over the cemetery, which contains the worst two people inside. The couple had heard a lot about the story that the peasants of the area passed on, which says that the two statues leave the cemetery in the evening, on what is called the Day of All Souls for them, and that they visit the places where their old crimes were witnessed. And they wander in the place where their big house is, and on which is the hut in which the happy couple lives. Now, however, they did not believe those opinions and rumors, nor did they believe about the day of the exodus of all the souls, nor those tales and myths. The story and the terrible tragedy began in 1901. After the couple had tea, Robert suggested the husband to go for a walk to watch the sunset in the wonderful countryside, but the wife Mary preferred to stay by the fireplace in the house. She was very tired, and so the husband, left alone, his feet led him to a corridor leading to the courtyard of the church, and suddenly he stopped walking, and he could not believe what his eyes saw. Among the trees he saw the tomb of the very wicked knights, and it was glowing with white light, and the sky was black, and a rainy night and clouds filled the sky. The details of the tomb were strangely clear from above, the heavy marble covering disappeared, and with its disappearance, the marble statue of the two men disappeared. The first thing that came to Robert's mind was that the matter was nothing more than an optical illusion, and perhaps one of the rioters did it, but he remembered something very important. It is difficult to lift the marble covering from the top of the cemetery. It is very heavy, and no one can handle it. Rather, a group of people felt very shocked, and then moved away from the place, repeating to himself that he was delusional, and he wanted to return to the house, but after a while he returned to the cemetery, wanting to make sure whether what he saw was fiction or real. He walked with great courage and stood in front of the cemetery, and lit some matches, and found the lid intact in the cemetery, and the marble was still on it. Something strange, which suggests that there were those who lifted the cover of the marble tomb, but he noticed something strange. he found and noticed the absence of one of the fingers from the palm of one of the statues, so he imagined that the matter was like this. But he did not notice it from the beginning. And he convinced himself that he was delusional, and the statue was still there, and perhaps he was deceived by the lack of light, and on his way to the hut he began to wonder if he would tell his wife what had happened. Would the novel scare her or would she laugh at her? Robert took his way through the corridor leading to the hut, and it was dark as he approached the hut. He gave his usual whistle, expecting to hear his wife's whistling, as she always does every day. But this time he heard no whistling. How much he noticed that all the windows of the house were not showing any light. Robert sensed that something bad had happened, and rushed to run. He went to his hut and called his wife, and pushed the door hard and found it very dark. And he had used up all his matches when he was at the cemetery, so he rummaged his way in the darkness in search of another box of matches, shouting his wife's name, shouts rising and loud, when they found finally a lamp. He lit it up and stood looking around, not believing what he saw. The little sitting room was in a state of total disarray. Everything was smashed, everything was out of place, everything had been hit so badly directly, even the stone floor of the place was cracked as if it were pieces. And there were those who hit her with something very heavy and strong, as cracks appeared in the walls, and the heavy dining table saw her broken on the ground and turned upside down, and in the midst of this total chaos and devastation he saw Robert, his wife, on the ground, was killed and completely mutilated. In his statements and the official police reports of the accident, Robert said that his wife's face drew a frozen expression of fatal horror. The wife was strangled. The husband walked 3 full miles to the nearest village asking for help, and when Ashburn police investigators arrived and sent patrols until they surveyed the whole area, they found no trace of the murderer, and the day before the funeral, Robert Sacken sat next to his wife's body lying on the ground completely disfigured. In the middle of the hut he thought for the 1000th time of the experience he had had in the churchyard, and the legend popular among the peasants about what it takes place on the day all souls depart. And in the violent vandalism which he saw on his return to the hut he was thinking, what supernatural force was able to bring about such a total destruction, and all this work was looking at the cracks in the stone ground of the place. And the great cracks in the stone ground of the place, to the length of the cracks extending along the wall, there is something very strange. Who did that and who killed his wife, and for the last time took hold of his wife's hand, whose fingers were firmly closed? And very gently Robert began to open the fingers of the palm, one after the other, and a piece of white stone of marble fell to the ground in the form of 2 marble fingers. And here the man began screaming hysteria. Did the 2 brothers kill the wife on the day of the exodus of All Souls when they found her in their house? In the end, one must be careful when buying a new house, because on the day of the exodus All Souls will not accept to find anyone living in their house.